Hello. So in this video, I'm going to talk about one of my all-time favorite plays, which is Molora by Yael Farber. So this is a South African adaptation of Aeschylus's Oresteia from ancient Greece, which is one of the most important sets of plays from ancient Greece. It's the only surviving trilogy that we have, but it's also considered one of the most influential plays of all time, or one of the most influential series of plays of all time, rather, because it deals with the transition from a society where justice is based on violence and sort of individual vigilantism to a society where justice is based on the rule of law and legal process. Molora is taking up those same ideas for post-apartheid South Africa. So this play premiered in 2003, I think. I'm fairly certain it's 2003 at the Grahamstown Festival in South Africa. But it's a really interesting play because, in part, so the thing that I find really interesting about it is that it blends different performance traditions without hierarchizing them. So traditionally, in a lot of British literature in Africa, or a lot of South African literature, especially by white authors, European forms are presented as superior to African forms. So in this case, we've got three major performance traditions or sources. We've got the Oresteia from ancient Greece, but then we've also got the Truth and Reconciliation Commission as a performance form, and we've got a Xhosa folk singing tradition called Umnunkwolo, which is performed by the Moku Cultural Group, who plays the chorus. And so these three elements, at least I argue in my writing about this play, these three elements are presented with a balance that imagines a unified collective destiny for South Africa. But one of the things that's really interesting about Farber's treatment of the Oresteia in the play is which portions she chooses to use. So in the Oresteia, essentially what happened in play one is that Agamemnon returns from the Trojan War and he's murdered by his wife Clytemnestra. Because at the beginning of the Trojan War, he sacrificed their daughter Iphigenia in order to get good winds, and Clytemnestra is understandably peeved about that. In the second play, Orestes, their son, who has been sort of in exile / hiding from Clytemnestra's somewhat tyrannical rule, returns, and he, along with his sister Electra, murder Clytemnestra and her lover Aegisthus. What then happens in the third play is that Orestes has been pursued by the Furies across Greece, and he has a trial set up by Athena, which establishes the trial by jury to determine whether or not someone is guilty of a crime. So what Farber does that's really interesting with the Oresteia story is she actually drops pretty much the entire third play, which is where Athena sets up a tribunal in Athens to let citizens decide whether or not Orestes is guilty. And part of the reason that it's really interesting that she leaves that out is because in Aeschylus, this is top-down justice. The system of justice, the judiciary, is imposed on the Athenians by the gods. In Molora, she utilizes the TRC structure, which, while not necessarily controlled by the people of South Africa, was much more of a bottom-up system. The people, regular everyday people, played much more significant of a role. And so Farber takes a lot of the sort of structure of the TRC, especially in the staging and the relations between the audience and the performance. So, for instance, she says, contact with the audience must be immediate and dynamic, with the audience complicit, experiencing the story as witnesses or participants in the room, rather than as voyeurs excluded from yet looking on in the world of the story. She also says, this is stage directions, by the way, when describing the layout of the stage itself, she says, the ideal venue is a bare hall or room, much like the drab, simple venues in which most of the testimonies were heard during the course of South Africa's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Two large old tables, each with a chair, face one another on opposite ends of the playing space. Beneath Clytemnestra's testimony table is a large bundle wrapped in black plastic. Upon each table is a microphone on a stand. Between these two tables is a low platform which demarcates the area in which the past or memory will be reenacted. Center of this platform is a grave filled with the red sand of Africa. So that staging with the two desks with microphones, this is an interesting departure from the structure of the TRC, because in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, only one person testified at a time. So it wasn't like a traditional trial or like the trial of Orestes in the Oresteia, because you didn't have prosecution and defense, you didn't have claim and counterclaim, you had testimony given. Here we do have an agonistic structure. We do have a conflict between two characters, Clytemnestra and Electra. But the structure visually is meant to evoke the TRC, and the role of the chorus, who again is played by the Nwoku Cultural Group, which is a Xhosa singing group, they visually evoke spectators of the TRC as well as a Greek chorus. But they play a much more significant role than choruses tend to in Greek tragedy, because the chorus in Molora ultimately resolves the conflict. So this is toward the end of the play, and this is one of the most important scenes of the play. The stage directions say, the women, Electra is about to attack Clytemnestra with a pickaxe. And it says, the women of the chorus move swiftly as one. They grab Electra and overpower her. Electra screams in rage as they wrestle the axe from her hands. They restrain her, and she finally breaks down and weeps for all the injustices done to her, her brother, and her father. She slowly finds her breath. Umasengwana, which is the milking or friction drum, begins its deep, haunting sound. Electra emerges from the knot of women. She and Orestes are focused on their mother, still cowering center stage. They crawl toward her slowly. Clytemnestra, uncertain of what they will do to her, draws back in terror. As they reach their mother, they slowly stand together and extend their hands to help her up. Once on her feet, she is a broken woman. She backs away and leaves the performance platform, resuming her place at her testimony table. The women of the chorus explode into song, circling brother and sister. Electra and Orestes embrace, weeping. They have triumphed over their destiny of vengeance. The cycle has been broken. So this is one of the most important components here, because Molora is, despite adapting a Greek play and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which exposed some of the most horrendous human rights abuses in the post-World War II period, Molora is a hopeful play. It imagines that testimony, that truth-telling, and that this sort of liberatory gesture can create a better future, not only for the characters in the play, but for South Africa as a whole. And so that idea of carrying forward the work of the TRC is incredibly important in this play.